Welcome to the Women Matter podcast with your host, Marline C. DeRosso. Join us as we delve into all things women, from the complexities of fertility to empowering discussions on femininity and confidence. Our segments shine a light on the journey of family building, offering awareness and support to those navigating this path. We're here to tackle impactful topics crucial to women's lives, empowering you to be unapologetically yourself while embracing your femininity. Tune in for insightful conversations and inspiration to live boldly in every aspect of your life. Because here on the Women Matter podcast, every woman's story matters. Hi, I am Marline C. DeRosso, your host of the Women Matter podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a very special episode in store for us today, as I wanted to kind of tap back into the infertility space and talk a little bit about what I wish I knew before or finding out I had to undergo IVF. And that's what this episode is going to be about today, what I wish I knew about IVF when I had to undergo it back then. And it's one of those things that, because infertility is something that is not often spoken about, I am about 7 years removed from having my last infertility treatment, just because I got pregnant in 2017 with our last baby, and he was born in 2018. But my journey for IVF started back in 2011. So it has been a long journey, and my husband and I underwent, I want to say a total of, let's go through the story, and I want to make sure I get the number of IVF cycles right. I want to say it was 4 or 5. So we're going to tap into that. And it's really important to talk about what women have to look forward to, and the men too, when it comes to undergoing infertility treatments, because one of the most common treatments that people normally do end up being IVF. And because it is a area that, as much as there's a lot of talk about it, it's not really, spoken about from the lens of actual patients and what they go through on the day-to-day. I wanted to take that time to shed some light on that with this podcast episode. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Marline DeRosso. I am the host of the Women Matter podcast. And again, on today's episode, we're going to talk about what I wish I knew about IVF. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a step back and go back in time a little bit, because never in a million years did I think my husband and I would need to undergo infertility treatments, let alone IVF, to have our family. My husband, when I met him, he had already had a son. He is my bonus baby, Richard. I talk about him all the time. Where you see him, you see me. Where you see me, you see him. Actually, he still lives with us. I'm so blessed and excited to have him. And I always refer to him as my one baby that didn't cause me any labor pain. So for that, he'll always have a special place in my heart. So, okay, so when I met my husband, he had Richard. Richard was almost 2. He wasn't quite 2 yet. So he's been in my life for a very, very long time. And I grew up around many nieces, nephews, my cousins, just always loved babies, helped take care of babies. I just loved everything baby. As a matter of fact, I thought I wanted to have 10 children when I grew up. That's what I used to tell myself when I was a little girl. But obviously, we're not doing that, right? But more power to the people that, do have all of the kids. I have 4, and it's a lot. So more power to them. I give them utmost kudos, because it's not an easy feat, trying to have children, let alone having them and then rearing them up, in a way conducive to them becoming good people, right? Navigating this world. So my husband and I never really thought that we would deal with infertility, but we found ourselves down that journey. And it started for us where we ended up going to the first fertility specialist. And I remember being very young, and the nurses kind of shunned us and said, well, why are you guys here? You guys are still young. Just go and do and let it happen. And I said, you know what? No, it hasn't happened yet, although we weren't actively trying. So I want to make sure everything is okay, because the last thing I want is for it to be 10, 15 years down the line, and what, the medical field tells us is, if only you came 5 years earlier, if only you came, XYZ earlier. So from that point, that nurse told me that she didn't really say that to young patients anymore because she never looked at it that way. It's always better to go get checked out. And I have a video that talks about an episode, how to make sure your fertility is in check before you're even ready to have a baby, because time waits for no one. And Mother Nature, science, whatever you want to call it, things are happening in your body, and you want to make sure that you prepare, even though you're not yet ready to have a baby. So check out that episode as well. So in doing that, with that particular first fertility specialist, we were able to get checked out. It turns out my husband had slight male factor issues with respect to the count of his sperm, and I think that's when I was officially diagnosed with PCOS, or they were running tests to determine if I had PCOS. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And in my case, it presented as a major shift in my hormones. And I had a high level of male hormone, which is testosterone, and less estrogen. And the other thing that was indicative of me having PCOS is the all of the cysts. I had actual cystic ovaries. So if you looked at my ovaries on the ultrasound, it kind of looked like a pomegranate. You know how you cut a pomegranate in half and you see all of the little, follicles? That's what my ovaries look like on ultrasound as well. In addition to that, I didn't put two and two together at the time, but at around 18-ish, 17, 18, I started to have like facial hair that just started coming out of the blue. And I know it was around that age because I remember us preparing for either homecoming or prom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like these hairs on my chin. Like, what is that? So, of course, at that time, I didn't know anything about PCOS and hormones and hirsutism. Hirsutism is excess hair growth, and testosterone levels or anything like that. So, we were with that particular clinic, and in an effort to work on our infertility, we did 3 IUIs. And what I wish I would have known about the IUI is, information about, the medication that you had to take. The medication made me very hot, and, just different side effects. And I also gained weight because one of the things that they did to help treat the PCOS, because there's no cure for PCOS, they put me on metformin, and metformin is also used as a diabetic medicine, because oftentimes people with the PCOS have insulin resistant issues, and as a result of the hormones and things like that. So metformin was one of the medications that they used to help that. And with the metformin, I gained weight. I wasn't prepared for that. Um, and I don't see what it did. Like, now that I think back on it, I don't know what the metformin did for me except make me big. And then at one point I had hair thinning, like at the top. I don't know what this part of my head is called, but here at the top, like right in the middle at the top, I had some hair thinning. And I know it was also because of the imbalance of the hormones and the metformin medication as well. So, because I think I was on like a high dose. So I wish I would have known that, because not to say that you wouldn't do something different, but at least if you can mentally prepare for the fact that you're going to have hair issues and weight gain. So maybe you can kind of change your diet or be a little bit more active. And at that point I started doing Taebo. Billy Blinks and I are like best friends. And it was my mother-in-law Nella and I at the time that we were really big proponents of Taebo, and it really helped get a lot of my aggression and emotional feelings out, just with all the kicking and punching and, arm throwing that Tybo did at the time. So that was during IUI. And the other thing I wish I would have known during that part of the fertility treatment is that the IUIs don't normally work. It's only a very, at least in my experience and in speaking with other people, a very limited amount, or percentage, I should say, people find success in IUI. But normally doctors start with that as the second option. The first option is no, medical intervention outside of medication, and they give you Clomid, and that's a medication that's supposed to help you ovulate, and then you try on your own. And once that doesn't work, you kind of move on to IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. And with the intrauterine insemination, you can do it with Clomid. And those 3 cycles that we did with Clomid at that first fertility clinic. And with that, they kind of time your ovulation, and then you go into the clinic whatever day that it's actually they tell you you're ready, and your partner ejaculates into a cup or a container, and then they process the sperm and then use and I'm doing very high level, very surface level explanations. They process the sperm and then they, put it back into your uterus so that ideally the sperm has less ways to travel. Like they don't have to bypass the vagina and the canal and all of that. They insert them back into your uterus in hopes that because they time the ovulation, the sperm and the egg will meet, and then it just makes its way down the fallopian tube and implants. So we did 3 of those. So unfortunately, we were not successful in that. So that's the other thing. I think that